Good afternoon and welcome to our next session, Setting up the Stage for Black Student Success. Our presenter today is Dr. Mica Stewart, faculty member at Mount San Antonio College. Sometime there. If you have any questions for the presenter during our session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of our talk. On that note, I will hand it over to our presenter. Thank you, Dr. Stewart.
Hello, beautiful people. Yes, I am Mica Stewart, and I bring you greetings from Mount San Antonio College, which is located in the San Gabriel Basin and the original home of the Tongva people. So I bring you greetings. And I am going to share my screen now. At least I hope I am. Okay, so slideshow. From the beginning. All right, so just to make sure, how much time I have? 30 minutes for presentation, 15 minutes for question and answer, or 45 for presentation and 15 minutes for question and answer?
40 for presentation and 5 for question and answer.
Okay, so let me make that adjustment in my time. And I thank you all for staying. Those of you who may have come a little bit early or whatnot. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to talk about student success. I am an ethnic studies professor. I've been teaching at Mount San Antonio College for, oh gosh, about, well, 30 years now. Yes, I got started when I was 9. And I started in sociology, and now I got to move over to ethnic studies. And in ethnic studies, I teach African-American studies. And I just absolutely love it. And I've only been teaching this. This is only my 2nd semester. And even though this is an area that I've always loved, I am constantly learning. So I am excited to be on this learning journey with you. Okay, so setting up the stage. From superstar to stage crew, from superstar to stage crew. And I want us to think about that for a minute. When we think about, a performance that someone is doing, a superstar, right? It's all about them, and it's the focus is on them. It's how they want it. But what I'm proposing in this is that we have a mentality shift. Okay, that we stop thinking about teaching as all being about us and what makes us comfortable and how we want to do things, and that we transition to begin to think about teaching as being more about what's going to work for the students as opposed to what just works for me. And I know some of you probably are like, I already do that. If you do, then wonderful, okay? Hopefully there will still be some things that I say that will be able to be encouraging to you. It's just that I do a lot of presentations at my campus, and I have heard more than once, well, this is the way I learned it, and so this is the way I ought to do it. And so they're thinking about what worked for them as opposed to what's going to work for our students today. So I'm asking us to get a mentality shift, okay? And so again, we're not going to be Tupac and it's all eyes on me, all about me, right? This superstar mentality, everybody cater to me. This is the way I want it. But more that we are the stage crew. And the stage crew works backstage during the performances to keep the show running smoothly and safely. That's their job. They're not seen. They're not the center. People aren't trying to make them comfortable. They're trying to make the performer, the stars, comfortable. And if we think about our students as the stars, and again, I'm sure many of you do, then it just kind of changes things. And as the stars, we really want to know about them. So what I'm suggesting is that there are 5 things that professors can do to set up the stage for Black student success. And these things that I'm going to tell you, they're not just for Black students. Okay, you're going to find that they'll work for students, but I'm focusing in, obviously, because this is my presentation topic, on Black students. Okay, so number 1, show them that you care. Show them that you care about them as people. And, that sounds so basic. And it's like, well, of course. But I think that sometimes when we are teaching, we kind of forget the importance of relationship as we get caught up sometimes in rules, right? Like we got to establish those rules. Again, we were having a discussion with some colleagues just the other day, and they were like, we were going over the syllabus and how to make some changes to it. And they were like, no, I need to be clear that I'm in charge. I'm the boss. And, it's like, well, you can be in charge, right? But is it just that is that your main focus? If that's your main focus, then, being the one that, about the rules and, we got to do it my way. That, I don't know, that can just be, I would just encourage you to maybe think about it differently and to think about how can I, even in sharing the guidelines for the class, how can I communicate to them that I care about them as people, right? And I'm going to tell you some specific things that I recommend. And I'm recommending this because Black Lives Matter is more than a slogan, right? And so if we're not communicating that we care to our students, then we're communicating that they don't really matter. What they need, what they want doesn't really matter. And so I know that nobody wants to communicate that. I mean, if so, why did you go into teaching, right? So how do we make it more than a slogan? And so one of the key ways is to ask them about themselves. I am, unfortunately, on several dating sites, right? These dating apps. And so whenever I am, I meet somebody new, I meet some person, and that person does not ask me anything about myself, or even if we've had a conversation, and this happens quite a bit, we have a conversation and I am trained as a therapist. And so I'm, very active listener. And, I've had them get off the, closing up the conversation saying, this is the best conversation I've ever had. Oh my God, I am really enjoying you. I'm like, how are you enjoying me? You don't know anything about me because you didn't ask anything about me. This was all about you. You just got a free 15-minute session, okay? So when we ask our students about themselves, when we ask them, who are you? What do you like? What are your hobbies? Are you into painting, photography, filmmaking? What have been your experiences in education, positive and negative? And it's not just for the sake of conversation. It's to use that information because as the stage crew, when we learn, okay, this is what the student has experienced. How can I not repeat that? Okay, this is where the student is good. They feel that they are confident and have some skills. How can I incorporate that into the kinds of lessons that I give them? What are their interests? How can I incorporate their interests into the syllabus and into the content of what we're going to study? And it all starts with asking them about themselves. Now, this next question is probably, I think, the most important question. And I love this when I was looking for clip art. I love to include my clip art. When I was looking for clip art and I saw this, how you doing? And, and it doesn't have the verb in there, but I was like, this is it. This is kind of like that Black vernacular. And the only thing missing is baby, right? How you doing, baby? So it's like, when our students have been missing class, when they haven't been showing up, when they've been coming to class, but they've just been looking distracted, or they just aren't participating like they used to. Just pulling them aside and saying, how you doing? How you doing? What's going on? And then following up with that other question, how can I help? How can I help you? Because the thing is, one of the things that we know about, Black students is that they're less likely to ask the professors for help, especially if their professors are not also Black professors, okay? Because again, going back to that experience in education has not always been positive. And when we're looking at opportunity gaps, I never say achievement gaps, when we're looking at opportunity gaps and how to close them, that relationship piece is so important, right? You can have rigor. You can have as much rigor as you want. Nobody's ever saying to get rid of the rigor. Just add the relationship, okay? Add the relationship, because that is the most important question. Who are you and how are you? And how can I help? Now, another way that we can show them that they matter is that we can use humanizing language. Use humanizing language. Now, this gets into one of my pet peeves, and I'm trying not to get on my soapbox about it because I have very strong feelings about it. But when we refer to people as slaves, that their status becomes their identity, their social status becomes their identity, that is problematic because it's dehumanizing. So rather than referring to, when we're talking about history, rather than referring to someone as a slave, if we can refer to them by including their humanity, enslaved Africans, the enslaved people. And sometimes people think, oh, does that really matter? It really does. Language matters. Language matters because language can draw people in and it can push people out. It can lift people up and it can put people down. And a small change is a huge change. When we talk about slavery, when we talk about the past and we say enslaved, that is so distinct. And the thing about it is, we might say, well, yeah, we know that they were people, but it's like, do we? Do we really remember that? Do we really remember? Because when we think about how it's told, right? How history is told, oftentimes we'll hear that, the Europeans went over to Africa and kidnapped millions of slaves. Like, no, they went over and kidnapped millions of people who were doctors and lawyers and mothers and fathers and artisans and astronomers and parents and children and religious leaders, right? And we put it in that context, that just says something different, right? And we forced all of these people, to come to our country and engage in slave labor. Now you can use it as an adjective, but just not as a noun to define people. Okay. And again, sometimes we'll talk, so in the during the time, before the Civil War, we had, many of the Americans were very religious, and they would, the white families would go to church on Sundays, and they would take their children, and the mothers and fathers and children would all sit together. And sometimes they would even take their slaves. And you might read that in a book and not even see it, right? But all the white people got to be humanized. They were mothers and fathers and children and people and families, and they took their slaves. And then the slaves are suddenly, the African people of African descent are suddenly just slaves. So again, changing our mentality means changing our language. And the other one is using Black as an adjective. Black is not a noun. So the Blacks, Black people. When I was in college, I had a professor who would ask me, I was the only person of African descent in the class. And she would turn to me and always ask, what do the Blacks think about that? And that was just problematic on so many levels. Okay, just so many levels, right? But what did I was like, I wanted to say, what is a Black, right? What is a Black? So she didn't even ask me what Black people think, right? But it was, then that's what if she was going to ask, it would be, what do Black people think? But she should never even ask that, because how can one person be the spokesperson for the entire group? And this was a sociology professor. So it's too bad that she did not know better. But you all, I'm encouraging you to use humanizing language and to remember that what words are adjectives and what words are nouns. And even though you will hear scholars, you know, I have a lot of respect for certain scholars, and sometimes they will use slave too. And Michelle Obama, I love Michelle Obama. And she said the White House, the house that I live in, was built by slaves, not enslaved people. So just think about it. All right. And then again, choosing your language in the syllabus. Is it really, you know, pointing the finger, the mean teacher, threatening language? If you don't do X, Y, Z, you will fail, right? Again, part of it has to do with our understanding as professors, how we have been socialized to understand our role. And it's to whip people into shape, okay? And yes, and I said whip people into shape intentionally. And we use threatening language. If you don't do X, Y, Z, you will fail. And so we put this fear out there. And so then our students who already come, right, a lot of them having been educated or miseducated, as Woodson would say, for so many years into believing that they aren't good enough, then they get into our classes. And if we use threatening language and always talk about failing, then it can become that self-fulfilling prophecy. So another way is to use positive language. After you complete X, Y, Z, you will advance to. So we start with the assumption, of course you're going to complete it, right? And when you complete it, you will advance. And then if you're struggling, then don't worry, because I'm here to help. How you doing, baby? I'm here to help. And then show them that you care about your discipline, right? On the first day when I'm talking to my students, I always tell them that I am not one of those professors that you look at and you wonder, where is it that you wish you were? Because obviously it is not here. And I'm sure that many of you have had professors like that, or you know, teachers at some point, you know, that just had no enthusiasm for their discipline. So, you know, our body language is so important. You know, how we approach the subject is so important. So, you know, do we approach it like, you know, like we're bored? Maybe we're suspicious. It's worth going to sleep on. We don't really know what we're talking about. Or are we excited? You know, are we ecstatic to be there, right? So I encourage you to have some excitement about your discipline because it's contagious. Okay, so we want to show them that we care. That was the first one. And then we want to tell them how to succeed. Okay, tell them how to succeed. So, you know, in education, we often talk about the hidden curriculum. And so the hidden curriculum, you know, we are talking about those things that aren't spoken, right? Those rules, those expectations, those assumptions that we make that we don't really speak. And so we think that students should come in knowing X, Y, and Z. And so then we just expect that they're going to know something and we just maybe skip some things, right? So we have to be very explicit. And one of the things I like is I really like, you know, TILT, transparency in learning and teaching. And you know, that we can just really be transparent, really spell it out. So it's not, okay, I want you to write a paper about X, Y, Z. But it's like, well, what does that mean? What does that paper look like? And, you know, and one of the things that I have found that's really helpful for students is to have examples. And I always have examples of, oh, you know, what a good paper looks like. And if I find that it really helps students. And with this telling, you know, students how to succeed, you know, sometimes we don't know what they don't know, right? And so when we can ask them back, you know, okay, just do that reflective listening. So what am I asking you to do in this assignment, right? And then it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, something got lost there. So telling them how to succeed, telling them that it's okay to come see me during office hours. You are not going to interrupt me, okay? It's okay to submit your work early. I mean, I had a student want to know if it was okay to submit it early. I was like, yes, all right. Whatever it is how you operate, communicating that to our students and not expecting them to be able to read our minds is really important. Okay, the third thing. So we tell them that we care. Then we tell them, you know, how to succeed. We show them that we care. We tell them how to succeed. And then we ask ourselves some hard questions. Okay, we ask ourselves some hard questions. And there are a lot of hard questions that we can ask. But I think a really key question is, you know, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to do? Am I really willing to transform my curriculum? Am I really willing to look at it and see the Eurocentrism in it and make adjustments? Am I, and this is, you know, there's a lot of questions here. So am I professing neutrality, but really demonstrating Eurocentricity? And that happens so frequently, right? And some people are like, well, you know, I'm just teaching math. I'm just teaching science. And so, you know, those things are not Eurocentric. They're not, they're just math and just science. They're neutral. Well, really, all knowledge is subjective. It has a subjective element to it, right? Even like astronomy, I was thinking about this. When I grew up, there were 9 planets. And then now there are 8 planets because they decided that one planet should no longer be considered a planet, right? So, you know, we have criteria, but that criteria changes, even biology. When we look at, you say, well, you know, it's either this or it's that. When we even determine sex. Okay, I really don't want to go too far down that trail, but when we're looking at athletes and who gets to participate, and I'm not even talking about trans athletes. I am not talking about trans athletes. I'm talking about athletes who identify as women, are women, have all the biology of women, but maybe they have a certain level of testosterone. And so then they say that their testosterone levels are too high, and so then they can't compete. And so, but the level that they determine that at, that's very subjective. Okay, that's very subjective. I don't know if any of you follow track and field, but that's been an issue. So, you know, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to examine? What am I willing to change? And if when you're talking about the history of your discipline, giving a historical background, and your history of your discipline starts in Greece, or it starts in Europe, and it doesn't start in Africa, you really might have to look at that, because, you know, that so much of what we know, so much learning, so much knowledge began in Africa. Before there was the abacus, and we learn about the abacus, before there was the abacus, there was the Ishango bone, okay? Who knows about the Ishango bone that's discovered in Africa? And it's a mathematical tool, and a tool for even doing other measures for astronomy. right? So if we're going to talk about the discipline, we're going to go back and we're going to maybe talk about the history. Ask yourself, where am I starting? Where am I saying is the beginning? Because once you learn more, and this is the thing, y'all, some of this, I was never taught this. Even having so many of the classes that I've had in race and ethnicity, there was still so much that I wasn't taught, right? And I am just learning. So Henry Louis Gates does a wonderful, what's it called? Documentary on Africa and the origins of civilization. And he talks about the Ashango bone, and he talks about surgery, medicine, astronomy, okay? Diop, Dr. Diop, if you read some of his work, he talks about how civilization began in Africa and learning began in Africa. So these things, you know, when we say that, then it stops becoming like, you know, that our history or who we are as Black people, it started in the United States, and we just started as slaves. And then, you know, Abraham freed us. And then, you know, Martin had a dream, and Obama got elected, and there's no more slavery. There is still slavery, but there's no more racism, right? So we don't really learn what we need to learn. So we have to educate ourselves. And then we have to ask, am I willing to change my curriculum, do what I need to do? The images that I'm showing, am I willing to show images? Oh, looks like I froze. Hello?
Dr. Stewart, we can hear you. It is frozen though.
Okay. If you stop being able to hear me, let me know. Okay.
I will.
Okay. So, so what are we willing to change? What are we willing to do? And what do we really, really believe about Black students and their abilities? Because, you know, we hear, again, slavery was so long ago. Oh, looks like I'm back, my movement. Slavery was so long ago, and I just don't see how any of that can have any impact today. And maybe, I don't really want to admit it to myself, but maybe they just really aren't as capable, you know? So I really encourage you to do that hard work, to get into workshops, to get into the anything that's going, any kind of courses that are going to allow you to learn about your own self. Deep introspection is so important, because it's true for young children, and it's true for the older children, that what we expect, we demonstrate, we illustrate, we embody, we show. Okay. And so if we have low expectations, right? So my expectations just get lower and lower. That's great. And then the person says, eventually I'll be able to meet all of them, because our students will rise to our level of expectation. And if it's low, then they're not going to maybe achieve as much as they could achieve, versus if we had the high expectation, right? My expectations just get higher and higher. That's great. Eventually, I'll be able to meet all of them. It works both ways. But if we're not aware of our own biases, if we're not willing to ask ourselves the hard questions, if we're not willing to examine our own blind spots, then we can't make a change. And then guide them along the way. So I just like this image, because we have this, you know, professor just leaning over the student, you know, kind of showing him what to do. And, you know, again, when I think about, you know, someone being a guide, you know, there's telling me, okay, telling me what I need to do. Okay, in order to be successful, you need to, you know, come to class, you need to do the homework. These are the assignments, you know, this is how to do it. But really coming alongside me and walking with me to give me some guidance, right? I think about that, you know, because I get lost so easily. And I just think about hiking. And if I didn't have a guide, then I would really struggle. And then part of that guiding them is doing what we need to do to help connect them to the resources that they can have. So if you're going to hike, you got to have the right boots, right? You've got to have the right backpack. You've got to have that hiking stick. You've got to have your canteen. You've got to have all these things. And so if we're going to help our students to succeed, then how can we point them to the resources? How can we guide them over to the resources that they're going to need? It's like we can tell them, we can show them that we care. We can tell them what to expect in the class. We can ask ourselves some hard questions, but then practically, just that practical, right? If you don't have a computer, this is where you can go to get a computer. And not just leaving it all up to student services, right? So this is where you can go get some paper. This is where you can get some notebooks. This is where you can get some discounted books. Are we using OER resources, right? In my classes, the students don't buy anything, okay? They don't buy anything. Now, I have not found an African American studies book that I like, so I'm using a lot of primary sources and a lot of articles and a lot of, videos and even things that I create myself. And it's more work than just having a book, but everybody has everything that they need from day one. Okay. So what resources are we guiding them to the resources? Just some more images. And then finally, the fifth one, educating ourselves. So, we have, shown them that we care, and we've, told them, how they need to succeed. And then we've asked ourselves some hard questions, and we have guided them to the resources that we need. And then, I really encourage us to educate yourself. And I know I said this a little bit more, but, I would even really and truly strongly encourage, if you have not already, to take an African American studies class. Really, like I said, I am learning so much as I teach. I am sometimes angered as I'm studying and preparing my lectures, because I'm like, why wasn't I taught this, right? Of course we know why, but why wasn't I taught this? Well, I wasn't taught it because the educational system, as you've probably heard, was not designed for people who look like me. Education is a means of upward mobility. Education makes people harder to control. If you teach people how to think and think critically, they will question systems, especially oppressive systems. But I encourage you, even though you may not have received the things that you need, the lessons that you could have gained all this information, right? Educate yourself. And I think the workshops are good, but I really think a class, to the extent that you're able to just enroll in a class, even if you do it, over the breaks or something, so it can be accelerated. I really encourage you to take that step. And to never stop, right? To never stop educating yourself. I mean, like I said, I feel like, race and inequality, those are things that I've studied all my life, and yet I'm constantly learning. And I don't know how many of you had this feeling when Hidden Figures came out a few years ago. What? Why wasn't I taught this? Why wasn't I taught this? There's so many things that we're not taught. So if we can educate ourselves, because, it might not be there, but with more and more places offering ethnic studies, then there are some opportunities. Okay, so let me do a recap. If we want Black students to succeed, we have to set them up for success. And we do that by showing them that we care, by telling them how to succeed, by asking ourselves the hard questions, by guiding them along the way to the resources that they need, and by educating themselves, setting up the stage. Okay, well, that is all I have. So I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stewart. That was wonderful. I'm going to ask and invite our attendees to go ahead and chat in the Q&A box any questions that you have. I'm not sure if you can see there are some reactions floating on the screen of celebrating a wonderful presentation.
Oh, no, I don't see any. Oh, I see now the little hearts going. Oh, I saw, you know what? I saw a thumb go up and I wasn't sure. Well, I was like, okay, maybe my computer's just acting weird.
No, everyone loved it.
Oh, yay, yay.
I wanted to make sure you saw that. I'll kick us off with some questions. And I was wondering, you mentioned at the beginning, just getting to know your students and building that relationship. Could you give us some suggestions of how you do that in a virtual setting?
Oh, that's a really good question. You know, oh, that's my timer. I'm actually ahead. I'm never ahead. So, woo. I think that there's still the key question that you can ask, which is, you know, how are you, right? Because the conversation we're not just limited to the time that we're you know, face to Zoom face, right? Because that's it's like, it's so tricky with online. That's one way. We can have it like this, and then we can also have it where, like our classes, like the classes I do online, they're asynchronous, right? But when we notice that a student has stopped participating, has stopped submitting things, right? To just check in, you know, how are you? You know, what's going on? And really and truly, my first assignment that I give to students is you know, who am I? And I ask them, you know, what is something that you're excited about for this course? What is something that you're anxious about? You know, what is something that I can do to help you to have success in the class? You know, what is something that maybe somebody has done in the past, that a teacher has done in the past, that has been a hindrance for you? And then just asking that question, and then replying to their response with empathy. Oh, wow. You know, that would be terrible. I'm so sorry that you experienced that. You know, please let me know if there's anything that I do that even approaches that, because I never want you to feel like that in this class, because in this class, you are important. You know, so it's different, but we can still communicate that you matter, just by how we reply, and just by taking the time to reply. Let me add one more thing on that. When I ask them, what can I do to help them have success? It is so interesting that across the board, I get, give us feedback. Give us feedback on our work. And I just think that it's like, well, yeah, you know, but then it's like, no, some people don't, right? They don't really. It's just like they just put a grade on the paper, but I'm just like, feedback everywhere. And that's why grading takes 1,000 years, right? But it really matters, and making sure that that feedback is not just on what they didn't do, but focusing on that positive too. Okay, so I'll stop.
Thank you so much. I had a follow-up question that you answered, because I was going to ask if you did any like about me quizzes or anything like that. Quiz, I guess would be the term you would use there. So yeah, thank you so much. And we have a it's not a question, but a comment in the Q&A area. Ms. Artisan says, I so appreciate your suggestions. I do use many of them in my online courses. I miss the on-ground aspect very much though.
Yes.
She says, my race classes were always amazing and I learned something new all the time.
Yes, yes. That isn't that one of the best things about teaching, is that in teaching, we just get to keep learning, right? We just get to keep learning. So yeah, I just love teaching for that. I don't know if anybody, this is a hard thing about the webinar format, right? Is that we don't get that back and forth, because I love to say, hey, put in the chat this or put in the chat that, so we don't really get a chance to do that, but that's okay. But for those of you, that are still here, what resources, like what kinds of trainings do you have on opportunities to get on your campus for learning? I am curious about that, because we do offer a lot at Mount San Antonio College about things to learn about yourself. Like we have ITEL, like AQ, American Colleges and University Educators, right? And they offer a couple of different courses, but one that we offer is Inclusive Teaching for Equitable Learning, which is stands for ITEL, ITEL, and I'm facilitating that, and it's really good, and it helps us to again do that introspection, that inner work. I think a lot of people maybe did Cora. I don't know if any of you've done Cora through USC, and that's another good resource. But do you feel like your colleges offer some opportunities to do some of that deep introspection, asking yourself the hard questions? I don't know if anybody wants to put anything like that in the Q&A.
I don't see anything coming in yet. I was going to ask you though about resources as well. So thanks for going into that. You're reading my mind. It does look like we do have a comment though. I trained with base education. I did this through my public high school job.
Okay. I'm not sure what base education is. So let's see. I'm sure that's an acronym that stands for something. But I'm loving it. I'm just hearing I trained with, right? And so you are taking the time to ask yourself. And one of the things is sometimes we might be incorporating Eurocentrism just because we don't know anything else, right? And so it doesn't seem like that's what we're doing. But again, if we just haven't been exposed to other things. And so right now in my class, we're actually covering Afrocentric education. And so with Asante, who is considered the founder of the Afrocentric movement, Afrocentric education. And Afrocentrism means a lot of different things, but if we go based on his definition and how he defined it, I really like it, because it's not about lifting up Black people or the Black experience or people of Africa, or the African diaspora, and putting others down. It's about lifting up and seeing the value in the African experience, and seeing the value in other experiences as well. And so I love that, and in fact, in my class today, we're going to take a look at a reading, and well, I gave them the reading. We're going to evaluate it, discuss it, and we're going to look at some of the ways that Afrocentrism differs from, the Eurocentric education that we've got. And again, the same thing about standards of beauty, right? And that, just teaching, our students that they are beautiful. And I greet my students. I greeted you all today. I don't even know if you heard it, but I said, hello, beautiful people, right? Every email that I send, I start with hello, beautiful people, and then move forward from there. So to the extent that we can, just in our language, in our just simple comments communicate, you are beautifully and wonderfully made just as you are, you know, and your name is beautiful. Oh, I do want to tell you this one thing. It's very important when we're talking about language to use students' names. Okay, I see somebody put a resource in the Q&A. That's really good. Using students' names. I had a student tell me, this was an African-American student. She told me, and her name was a very simple name, I thought, you know, it was something like, I'm changing the name, but something like Tasha, right? But the teacher decided that that name was too difficult. So she said, I'm going to call you Tina. And this was when she was just a little girl, right? And so this teacher just decided to rename her. And I was just like, that is so problematic, right? Because naming ourselves is an act of agency, and to take someone else's name is to objectify them, and you have power over them, right? You don't have the right to do that. So learning students' names and then pronouncing them correctly, that is so key. Yes. So it's all about saying you matter.
Absolutely. Dr. Stewart, this has been absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for your time and your insight and for everything you shared with us today. At this time, we are going to conclude our session to begin preparing for the next concurrent session. And everyone, that will begin here at, just double checking my times, 4 p.m. Eastern. And you can view the chat for the session meeting room links and access the conference website for a complete list of our concurrent sessions and their descriptions. And while accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the virtual exhibit hall to say hello to my colleagues on the Hawks team. And while you're there, you can view a quick 5-minute demonstration, request your t-shirt, and be entered to win a $50 Amazon, or not Amazon, I'm so used to saying that. Also, in the spirit of St. Patrick's Day, you will find a few golden coins throughout the conference website. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Click on the coins to be entered to win an additional raffle, and we will see you at the next session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Stewart.
Thank you.